Welcome back to The Deep Dive, a low-effort podcast. Today we're going to be reviewing the Glenn Morgan film Willard, starring Crispin Glover, Arlie Ermey, and Laura Elena Herring.
Start over, but I'm almost done. Chills, right?
Yeah.
That line from the 2003 remake of Willard just burrows into your brain, you know?
It really does.
It captures that feeling we all get sometimes, wanting to hit the reset button on life, on a relationship, on everything. That desire for control when it feels like things are spinning wildly out of reach. That's the core of this whole movie.
Totally.
We're diving deep into Willard's world today, the unsettling atmosphere of that dilapidated mansion, the constant feeling of being overlooked.
Yeah.
Honestly, the film does a phenomenal job of making you feel like you're right there with him experiencing his isolation firsthand.
You really get pulled in.
And get this, the director originally envisioned shooting everything in rat cam.
Wow.
Imagine that the whole movie from a rat's point of view.
Okay.
I'm curious, what do you think about that concept?
It's certainly a unique idea, isn't it? While it might have been effective in short bursts to really immerse us in the rat's perspective, I think it was a wise choice to stick with a more traditional narrative approach.
Right.
The film's strength lies in its psychological thriller elements. Constantly viewing the world through a rat's eyes might have made it harder for the audience to connect with the complexities of Willard's character and his descent into madness.
I can see that. So we have Willard, a total outcast, struggling to cope. His home life is strained, to say the least. His relationship with his bedridden mother is. Well, let's just say it's not exactly heartwarming. It's almost suffocating, wouldn't you say?
Smothering is close, but the term emasculating is more precise. The film subtly portrays a dynamic where Willard's mother constantly undermines his agency, treating him as a helpless child rather than a grown man. It's this twisted perversion of the typical parent-child bond that contributes significantly to his feelings of powerlessness.
And as if that weren't enough, his work life is even worse. Arlie Ermey as Mr. Martin Willard's boss. Pure nightmare fuel. I mean, we've seen Ermey play tough guys before, but this performance is next level intimidating.
He's incredible at embodying these authoritarian figures.
Yeah.
You're right, we saw the gunnery Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket, but there's something even more unsettling about Mr. Martin. It's like his cruelty is intentional, almost pleasurable for him.
Exactly. With Hartman, you sensed some of it was an act part of pushing recruits to their limits. With Mr. Martin, it feels much more personal, directed solely at breaking Willard down.
That's a keen observation, and it speaks to the film's nuanced approach to power dynamics. This isn't about tough love or forging a better employee. It's about asserting dominance, about relishing in making Willard feel small and insignificant.
And that brings us to the turning point, the rats. Now bear with me, because at first it seems almost heartwarming. He finds these creatures, particularly Socrates, the white rat, and there's a genuine tenderness in their interactions. It almost feels like he's found companionship in the most unlikely of places. What are your thoughts on that initial dynamic?
I find it fascinating how the film plays with our expectations. Visually, Socrates is presented almost angelically. He's bathed in soft light, often framed separately from the other rats. Even the music softens when Willard interacts with him. It's a deliberate manipulation of the audience's emotions, almost lulling us into a false sense of security.
Absolutely. We want to believe that Willard's found something good, a genuine connection, but then of course Ben enters the picture and things take a much darker turn.
Ben's arrival signals a significant shift in the power dynamic. Willard is no longer simply caring for the rats, he's actively controlling them, and this newfound power becomes intoxicating. Especially when he starts using them against those who have wronged him. It's like he's finally found a way to fight back.
Right. Instead of being the victim, he can turn the tables.
It's exactly. Willard's control over the rats becomes a metaphor for the control he so desperately craves in his own life.
It's kind of heartbreaking when you think about it.
It is. He's been marginalized, bullied, and overlooked for so long, and suddenly he has a way to exert his will upon the world.
It's an intoxicating feeling, right? Especially when you've been made to feel powerless for so long. But I think what makes Willard so effective is that it doesn't shy away from the psychological toll of his experiences.
Precisely. The film subtly portrays the deterioration of Willard's mental state. We see him retreating further into himself, those moments of disassociation where he stares blankly lost in his own world, and those almost dreamlike sequences where reality and fantasy blend together. They're unsettling, to say the least.
They really get under your skin. You start to question what's real, what's imagined, and what's a product of Willard's increasingly fragmented psyche.
I think the rats themselves can be interpreted as manifestations of his internal struggles.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
Socrates, the white rat, represents that yearning for connection, for purity, for something good and untainted amidst the darkness of his life.
And then there's Ben.
Ben embodies those darker impulses that even Willard tries to suppress. He's cunning, ruthless, and driven by base instincts. The film cleverly uses these two rats to externalize Willard's internal battle. The classic conflict of good versus evil played out through this unconventional, deeply unsettling relationship.
And visually, the film does an incredible job of mirroring that internal struggle. The atmosphere is thick with dread, that creepy mansion, almost a character itself. The way they use shadows, always keeping Willard partially obscured, it's masterfully done.
Absolutely. The cinematography is crucial in establishing the film's tone. It creates a sense of claustrophobia even within the vast decaying spaces of the mansion. The muted color palette, dominated by greens and browns, enhances that feeling of decay, as if life itself is slowly draining from everything Willard touches.
It's like the whole world is rotting around him.
Yeah.
And then you have Socrates, that shock of white fur against all the gloom. For a while, it feels like a glimmer of hope.
That visual contrast is so powerful. It highlights the tragedy of Willard's arc. He finds a fleeting connection, a symbol of purity, but it exists within this all-encompassing darkness that threatens to consume everything.
And the soundtrack.
Yeah.
That haunting score, the way it creeps up on you. And then there's the use of the song Ben, which on the surface seems like an odd choice, but it adds a whole other layer of unsettling brilliance.
It's a stroke of genius, isn't it? This sweet, almost childlike melody about friendship, juxtaposed against the backdrop of Willard's increasingly disturbing actions. It creates this constant tension, a dissonance that mirrors the unraveling of his mind.
It's like the soundtrack to a slow-motion breakdown. You've got these elements of a classic Hitchcock thriller, but then you throw in this almost, I don't know, this twisted fairy tale element with the rats.
Well, that's a surprisingly accurate description.
Yeah.
The film constantly subverts expectations, blending seemingly disparate elements to create this unique atmosphere of unease. You're never quite sure what you're watching, and that keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Which brings us back to that haunting line. Start over, but I'm almost done. It perfectly encapsulates that feeling of being trapped, of desperately seeking control, but feeling overwhelmed by the weight of it all. It's like that primal scream we all want to unleash sometime.
It really is.
That feeling of being so close to some kind of finish line, but also wanting to rewind and start over from a completely different place.
A total reset.
Exactly. And Willard, it doesn't hold back. It makes you face those dark desires head on. What happens when those urges to just burn it all down when they take over?
It's unsettling, for sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of unsettling, we have to talk about that ending.
We do.
Big spoilers coming up, folks. So if you haven't seen the film, maybe hit pause and come back to us when you're ready.
Yeah, don't blame us if you get spoiled.
Right, not our fault.
Yeah.
Okay, so to jump into it without giving everything away,
Yeah.
do you think Willard gets what he deserves in the end? It's a tough one. Stuck with me.
It really makes you think, right? Because on the one hand, well, he's put through the ringer, but then the things he does.
Exactly. And the film doesn't let you off easy. It refuses to give you a neat little bow on top. No clear-cut, good guy, bad guy. It's messy. You're left with this lingering unease.
Which I think is so much more powerful than a predictable ending. It sticks with you because that's life, right? No easy answers. Sometimes the victim, the villain, they get all blurred together.
Exactly. And that's why Willard, it gets under your skin even now. It forces us to confront those parts of ourselves we don't like to admit are there, that capacity for both good and evil. Especially when we feel trapped.
It's a scary thought, honestly. We like to think we're the heroes of our own stories. But, Willard, it makes you ask, how far would you go and push to the limit?
And the fact that it's a movie about a man and his rats, that's what makes it so effective. It's not some big epic. It's these small, intimate moments of isolation, the seduction of power, and ultimately those tiny choices we make every day that add up to something huge.
It's quite a ride. And isn't that what a good deep dive is all about? Going beyond the surface, really unpacking the layers, the moments that make you pause and go, hold on.
Exactly. Those aha moments that stay with you long after the credits roll, Willard. It definitely delivers on that front.
It's been a pleasure dissecting this one with you. I always love digging into these darker, more thought-provoking films.
The pleasure was all mine, Willard. It's a film that deserves to be watched again, talked about. There's always something new to uncover beneath the surface.
Couldn't agree more. And for our listeners, if Willard has piqued your interest, check it out. Just maybe not alone at night.
Probably a good call.
Until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring, keep questioning, and maybe, just maybe keep an eye on those shadows. You never know what might be lurking there.